Alrighty. So, thank you, Lesley, for jumping on. I'm looking forward to this. So, most people won't know you that I share this with, and you're welcome to share the link with whoever you like as well. Okay.
Great.
But um, talk to me about who you are and what you do at the moment.
So, g'day everyone. My name's Lesley. I'm based in the Hawkesbury, west of Sydney, for those that actually know what it means. But it means I've kind of retreated to the bush in the last few years. And that's quite an interesting part of the journey in itself. But um, about 10 years ago, I started running, and that kind of changed many things with my life. For many respects, you kind of go, running is life changing, and people think, oh my gosh, no, it cannot. I cannot think of anything worse. But for me, it was a little bit of a journey of self discovery. Wanted to lose weight, and so I had been through a yo-yo up and down thing. So I had joined gyms, I had been on diets, I tried the Atkins diet, I tried calorie restriction, I tried all these kind of things. And I'd gotten to a point about 10 years ago where I wasn't liking what I saw in the mirror, but I knew that I couldn't do what I'd always done. The classic iteration of always do what you've always done and you'll always get what you've always got. So I had to mix things up. At the time, there were all these ads over the telly about the Michelle Bridges 12 WBT program,
Oh,
which is a
wow. Yep.
12-week body transformation. And it piqued my interest. So I went down and checked it out. And what I did like about it was that I thought you can choose the kind of exercise that you've got. They had a nutrition program alongside it because I knew it was never just about the exercise, even at that point. And where we were living was on a place called the Bay Run, which is in the inner west of Sydney. And it's a 7K roughly loop around the water. And you'd see people running all the time. And I thought to myself, if I could go for a run around that loop a couple times a week, surely I'd keep some weight off and I'd lose some weight. So that was my motivation. The other scenario is I didn't want to go to a gym again, mainly because I didn't want to be on someone else's time schedule. I didn't want to have to go, okay, my life's got to fit around the class of the gym. I figured if I had that path right there, I could choose whether it's morning, afternoon, and go whenever I want. I'm not on anyone else's time schedule but my own. And so I'd have flexibility around my own life. So that's why I chose like the learn to run scenario, not because I thought running would ever be anything magical. However, it really did change my life because there's two elements of it. I'll start with the running part first, mainly because um, that's obviously how I've started this combo. Um, the Learn to Run program gets you running 5 kilometers non-stop. So a little bit like the Couch to 5K, but it was quite gentle in its approach. So literally the first session is 1 minute run, 1 minute walk, and then you're just changing those intervals until you're getting to the 5 kilometers. And it took me 12 weeks, and I did that. I did lose some weight, spoiler alert. But the key thing here is in that by, I reckon, around the 7th or 8th week, I actually didn't care about the number on the scale anymore. Like that was kind of the cool part. I was like, wow, my body can do this stuff. It's like, look at what function I've got. Look at what I feel.
How
Like
how
there was,
old how old were you just when
I
you
was
did this?
about 35 at this point,
Yep.
35, 36 roughly. Um, so I had been through, I'd lived what, not an unhealthy life, I wouldn't say. And like no one would ever look at it and say that what I was doing was unhealthy. Like I could go for a hike if I wanted to. I had like a level of fitness. It was what I now, on retrospect, call a very indulgent life. Like I would give into cravings and desires and not really think about what that impact on my mental health, my physical health. And I would just lead that indulgent life. Like I would stay up till 2, 3 in the morning, not get a lot of sleep. Just if I was going out to dinner a lot and which is fine. Like you can eat out and still do wonderful things, but I'd be like, oh, I'm eating out, so I'm having the hot chips. Like, but that was every single time. I would just indulge everything. And so there was like very little discipline in my life. Learning to run, put boundaries, constructs, and ultimately on reflection, I can say this now, discipline. Now, alongside that was a nutrition program, like there were meal plans. So I always loved to cook, but this made me rethink the structure of what was on my plate.
Yep.
And so by doing that, it opened up a whole new way of thinking for me. I will be completely upfront, like at that initial 12 weeks, probably, well, that initial 24 weeks, because I did about 5 12-week programs back to back.
Okay.
But the first two, right, I was doing like 1,200 calories and adding exercise.
So that's
So
not good, is it?
no, it's not necessarily good. And I say this to be completely transparent. It's like, yes, I absolutely lost weight. Um, and I guess it was okay for potentially that first 12 to 24 weeks because it's a controlled period of time. It's the great thing about the program is it helped you realize when you needed to up the calories. So it had this initial period where you could restrict them, but it also taught you that you don't have to be on that level at the same time. You got to experiment with different levels of calories. Um, but so I just want to acknowledge that the weight loss there, if for anyone that's watching this, it was calorie restriction plus exercise that gave that result. The difference being is that once I realized it was about how I felt and what my body could do, and you stopped caring as much about how quickly that weight come off, it was very easy once that mindset changed to realize it was about fueling and not calorie restriction. So potentially it wasn't a bad thing that that happened because I could get some understanding, but I wouldn't say to everybody blindly follow that path, like understand what you're getting into there, because I can only say this on hindsight. And I guess in some respects, I was lucky because it can actually come back to bite you in the butt if you do calorie restrict too much without enough whole foods. Because what I did see, there was a great social component to it where people were talking about their own journeys. And some people took it to an extreme to say, it's just about the calories. Like, look, we can go to McDonald's, and if you get this meal, this is 1,200 calories for the
Oh.
day, right? And so this is the danger of thinking it's just about the calories, right? But
Yeah.
there's no nutrition in that. I took it as an opportunity to learn about the nutrition alongside of the calories, so it didn't bite me in the butt too much. But if you are foregoing nutrition purely basing on calories, then you're not nourishing your cells, and that's something I know now because of where this then took me. Because I got to 5K and then I'm like, oh, I want to keep running because I liked how I felt. I thought, oh, I'm going to maybe try and run 10K. So the next time I did the program, I did the 5 to 10K program. The thing I'll say here to go to people, like, I didn't actually get to 10K within that program. It was for me. It took me like 24 weeks to get from that 5K to the 10K. Um, so just because there's a program that gets you in 12 weeks to this certain point, it actually doesn't matter. Like if you don't get arbitrary points, you're still growing and still developing, whether it be fitness or health goal, like whatever the goals are, right? It doesn't matter if we don't stick to these arbitrary 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, and then I thought, oh, what about a half marathon?
And what is a half marathon for people that watch this that don't know that?
Oh, yes. Okay, sorry. I go into default mode. So a half marathon is running 21.1 kilometers
Okay.
or 13 miles for those that might be on the non-metric.
And this is non-stop, by the way.
This is designed to be non-stop.
Yeah.
Um, and the thing I'll say that it's non-stop, but it doesn't matter how fast,
Yeah.
right? We can sometimes assign what running should look like in terms of speed and so forth. The other aspect is that sometimes it's not non-stop in
Yeah.
the sense of people might do like some little walk intervals to have a
Yeah.
drink of water and things like that, right? But that's running, guys.
Yeah.
Running is not what you see at the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Running is a type of gait that means that you've got 1 foot off the ground at one point, right?
Yeah.
It's not associated with speed or a look. Everyone watching this has got a runner's body if they want it, just saying. And that's not about how you look, it's about function.
Yeah.
This is something I've learned. It's about the function. Um, Once I ran 21.1 kilometers, which I did happen to do mostly non-stop apart from having some water, I thought, well, if I can do that, I can run double that, which is a marathon, which is 42.2 kilometers. And so I did. I went straight, and this is how I did see these 5 rounds back to back. You might think, oh, doing 5 rounds of this transformation program was about how I looked. Actually, no, it's like not at all. This then became about what can my body do, and it was a structure that helped do that. And so it got me from doing nothing to running a marathon.
Yeah.
During my first marathon, which took me almost 6 hours, by the way, so I'm not by any means a Speedy Gonzalez here. But I said to myself, I love this. This is so cool. I know it sounds really weird to most people, but I'm halfway through. I'm going through this struggle because it is a struggle. I'm not denying any of that. But for me, I was like, this is great. There was this whole joy in doing hard things and like this joy in even though it was hard for my body to do it, it was great that I could still actually do it.
Yeah.
And then I just was like, I want to run more and more marathons. And so I did. I just kept signing up for marathons and kept running marathons.
Yeah.
It became part of my thing. So to date, I've run 25 marathons. No,
Yeah.
24, sorry. 24 marathons officially. During COVID, I did a whole heap of marathon distances on my own because events weren't on. Um, And I've also done about 13 what they call ultras. So an ultra marathon is anything basically more than 42.2 kilometers. But for me, that's ranged from doing um, whether it be a 45-kilometer or a 50-kilometer. I've done some that are like 60 or 70 kilometers. I've done 500 kilometers.
So talk,
And I'm,
talk to me about 100 Ks, right? Because I'm not a runner.
yeah,
Even though you say everyone has a runner's body, totally get that. But that's not
yeah, yeah,
my jam.
yeah. And that's cool.
Yeah. But 100 Ks. So that's overnight, obviously. It's all that
Yep.
sort of jazz. Yep.
Yep, so it's non-stop. Now, when we say 100 Ks, there's a few ways that this can be done. So, like when we're talking the stuff that I was doing with my marathons, like that's like on the road, pounding the pavement kind of scenario. You can do that for 100 kilometers. Sometimes they do those like on the road. Sometimes they do them around a track. The way I do them is in the bush, basically up and down mountains. And so what that means effectively is that it's trail running, which is a glorified hike for me, really, in many respects. So you're going as fast as you can, but you're going what the terrain allows. So obviously you're trying not to stack it on tree roots and rocks and all that sort of stuff. And also when you're going and climbing up mountains, I'm not running up some of these steep. bloody hills and mountains.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of walking, running, hiking. I've got things like hiking poles to help me as I go, but we're going non-stop. Like it doesn't mean I don't stop. Obviously, I need to go to the bathroom. I stop at aid stations to refuel and things like that. But we're going as quickly as we can to finish the distance
Yep. So you start, and then you keep going and
until
do
you're
whatever
done.
you need to do until you're done. Yep.
Yep, exactly. And this is the thing, like when I run with people and I to just add this little tidbit in, because I fell in love with running, I became a running coach. And so when I work with people, often they go to me and they start slowing down and I'm like, not even slowing down, they want to stop. And I'm like, well, why are you stopping? Why, like, what's going on? Like, because I'm trying to understand what's going on in their headspace. And they're like, oh, because I'm tired. And I'm like, I get that, but we don't stop because we're tired. We stop when we're done. And so in the context of these 100K ultras, it's like, yes, I get tired. I do get to a point where I'm like, oh, but we don't stop till we're done, right? Because we've got to get the task done.
This
That's a little
appeals
bit.
this appeals to certain personality types, but yep, keep going.
It does. It does appeal to certain, like, so people that are very achievement oriented, like, love this space. Um, I actually think it does encourage people that are somewhat neurodiverse because it requires a little bit of hyper focus,
But
right, on the task.
if you cycle back to what you said at the beginning too, you fell in love with the fact that your body could do something that you didn't think it could do.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And so you've got the people that have done it from a young age, but you get a lot of people like me that come in to this running caper midlife.
Yep.
Um, they're looking to find themselves, and then they've not necessarily treated their bodies right. And then they realize when you start to treat your body right, what you can do. Then they might have also seen people lose function. They might have seen family members go through chronic illness, particularly around mental health and dementia, right? So it's either cognitive decline or they've come into it as a tool to help manage their own mental health challenges, right? So there's that huge mental aspect there. It's one of those funny things where suffering a little it becomes a release in ways.
And we know that exercise is good for releasing the happy hormones and all that
Yep.
jazz in the brain. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what we're doing on a few levels, and again, to add some context here, why I talk about cellular levels and what exercise does as I get into some of this sciencey stuff. Not only did this whole thing change my life in terms of I loved running, then I became a coach. I actually went back to uni again and became an exercise scientist, and doing I'm in the process of completing a PhD in running marathons, essentially.
So
Um,
for anyone that's watching this too, a PhD is that next level of study as such at university. But it is effectively like doing an ultra marathon, but you're using your brain.
yeah, it absolutely is. Thanks, B, because that is a great analogy. I'm just now using my head to run ultras as well as my body.
Exactly.
Um, so my area around exercise science, because it's quite a broad, is more exercise physiology. So it's like, how are we taking the substrate? So how are we taking the fuel? So our carbs, proteins, and fats, and how are we turning that into energy? So it factors in things like mitochondrial health, um, metabolic pathways, how that might change with and without exercise with different kinds of fuel and so forth.
Yep.
Um, and so I now know, right, that not only does exercise make us feel good, I now kind of know why. So, firstly, we're starting to encourage blood flow around the body. So, when we're a bit more sedentary, We don't have stuff moving around our body. We don't have waste products being taken away as much. We don't have nutrients being delivered as much to the cells in our body, which is needed. And so when we start exercising, and I'm talking any kind of exercise here, like going for walks, guys, like very going for walks or just moving in a way that brings you joy, because it needs to bring you joy, right? Running, the reason I could keep running is because I found what made me happy. For some people, that's not going to be running, and that's okay. Not everyone has to run. Um, but we're moving around. And so this means that our brains, like we're not developing all of those plaques around our brains that shuts down the brain. So a big part of the whole cognitive health side of things, a whole half of the dementia equation is purely not getting enough oxygen and so forth to the brain,
Yep.
not getting enough blood flow to the brain. And so if we can just do that, like we will maintain our cognitive function. Um, and so same with anything in our body. So same with any sort of aches and pains. If we can move things around the body, we will eventually ache less, right? It's going to be absolutely hard to start moving because you're not going to feel like it. I'm going to say double hands up here. You're not going to want to, but just try, because once you start, it's amazing just a little bit what it does. This is why people that have dogs, right, they're generally of better health because they take their dogs for a walk. So that means they get that little bit extra movement.
Yep.
They get that little bit extra blood and lymph flow around the body. So just that little change in their lives can have such a flow-on effect.
Circulation is key.
Yeah, yeah. And then when I went back to uni, I went down the whole rabbit hole of, okay, I'm always being very open to the fact of, okay, what are we being told versus what's actually happening in the body? And then I realized, oh my gosh, this is not about calories in, calories out, people. I then went this whole other level and realized, okay, this is about supplying our cells with the micronutrients. It's not about purely carbs, fats, proteins. It's not about the macros. Like within the running world and with any kind of endurance or exercise, it becomes about, are you getting enough calories? Are you getting enough carbs?
It's missing the point.
It's missing the point. It's like, are we getting our vitamins and minerals that we need to actually produce the energy?
And
It's not
to
about,
help with the recovery and the soreness.
and to
Yeah.
help with the recovery, but you could have all of the empty calories in the world in your system, but you're still going to feel low in energy because you don't have what your body needs to make our energy currency, which for those listening along is called ATP. So if I fall into that, this is essentially what's needed for us to move, for us to contract our muscles, including our heart, our diaphragm, our digestive system muscles. They all need this energy.
Yep.
Like,
These are our
why do we
battery
sometimes,
packs. Yeah.
like, this is our battery packs, right? And so it's easy to think of it in terms of exercise, but when I talk this through with some of the students I teach, it's like, guys, this is happening in our intestines, right? If our intestines need to move food through to digest it and it doesn't have enough of our energy currency, what's going to happen to the food we eat? It's going to sit there. It's going to essentially, okay, I could use the polite term and say ferment, but it's going to rot in our gut.
Yeah.
Um, does that mean that any of that nutrition is going to get into our bloodstream and into our cells? Absolutely not.
And would you want anything that's rotted in your bloodstream anyway?
No. And this is the thing, if that's the only thing that's there and that's getting into your bloodstream, like what does your body have to use for any kind of cellular repair? And why would you not feel completely crap?
Yeah.
However, right, it's a very hard, like this is where I sort of, people are looking for quick fixes here. So this process that I've taken everyone through about my life, like this is a 10-year
Yeah.
journey, right? This is a 10-year journey. There were little steps along the way. Didn't go from here to here, right? And so wherever any of us are at now, it's been a consequence of little steps. And it's either little steps up or little steps back. And so if we want to turn that around, it's not taking big steps, it's taking little steps each time. So what I learned about getting these nutrient dense food in, basically I ended up on a ketogenic diet
Yeah.
because I realized that for me, I needed to give my body some space. It's the best way to describe it. So for those that you might have heard of a ketogenic or a keto diet before, what it essentially is very low carb, pretty high fat, and moderate protein. Um, so what that looks like is 50 grams of carbohydrate or less per day. So I don't eat any grains, any starches, any sugars, pretty much. All of my carbohydrates that I get typically come alongside things like dairy or green leafy vegetables and things like that. And you're getting carbs from things like avocado that happen to be in, because you'd be surprised where you can get carb. Now, the reason I chose this path is when I was doing my honors research, I was studying um, glucose patterns in recreational runners. So healthy people, we put continuous glucose monitors on them. We got them to run on treadmills after being overnight fasted,
Yep.
right? And so we only gave them any food after. So obviously they were supervised and so forth. The reason of this was of the study was to look at validity and reliability of the tech. But what it also showed was that regardless of someone's baseline diet, because we didn't sort of select that, but people could just, they were just eating as per normal, even if they had not eaten for 12 hours before coming in and running on a treadmill for about 90 minutes, their body made glucose from stored glycogen in their liver, and they did not drop into anywhere near even trending towards hypoglycemia at all. So for those following along, hypoglycemia is when it drops below 3.9 millimole. This is typically when they say, um, you get lightheaded and dizzy. And it's also saying, people say, oh, that's when you're going to be negatively impacted in terms of performance, is when your blood sugar gets too low. Now, it never dropped anywhere near that because our bodies are amazing.
Yep.
Our bodies are amazing. And it's like, if I can see the fact that the body's making its own glucose, why do I need to eat carbs to fuel my exercise when my body's making it?
It's a very big stereotype or misconception, isn't it?
Yeah. And since that point, because this was back in 2023, so it's a few years since that point, there have been other studies come out by groups of exercise scientists showing that instead of needing to take on massive amounts of carbs during exercise, that we might just need enough just to make sure that our blood sugar doesn't start to dip.
Yep.
Because, and it's not even that our body needs necessarily that blood sugar, but when our blood sugar starts to dip, a whole bunch of protective mechanisms come forth in our brain.
Yeah.
So our brain will say, oh, this is getting too hard. You need to slow down. And so that's where performance is impaired. But if we take on, say, the amount of 1 or 2 jelly beans per hour during extended strenuous exercise, very small amounts, guys. It reminds our brain, oh, we're not actually going to starve.
Okay, we're not going to die.
We're not going to die. It takes us out of that protective mechanism because we're reassuring our brain that it's okay. We've got fuel coming. And we'll still use our fat stores because that's what our body can do. And our brain feels safe and we can keep going. There was this one guy that he's taken this to the extreme. He
There'll be
did,
more than one guy, but yeah.
yeah. There's this one guy in Western Sydney. He did 5 fasted marathons in a row. So he ran a marathon one day, fasted. I can't remember if he refueled in between, but I have a feeling he may not have. He may have just been consuming electrolytes to maintain his electrolyte balance.
Yep.
Then the next day he ran a marathon. Then he did the same thing 5 days in a row, and his times did not change.
Your body will adapt. The human body and the brain, the human species is amazing in terms of how fast it will adapt to what you are doing to
Yep.
it. We we underestimate ourselves, and I feel that you're talking about you wanted to do the things that you didn't think you could do, right?
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people that as they get older, they forget to push themselves into areas that are uncomfortable.
Yep.
And that's linking back into that brain talk, the cognitive function. We want to make
Yep.
sure we've always got ways to create new little pathways and
Yes.
doing things that might scare you or doing things that make you feel uncomfortable or hurt you a little bit, that the science has shown, it creates those little electric impulses in your brain and away you go. Yeah.
Yep. And this is the thing. I think a lot of people in the endurance exercise space get addicted to that,
Yes.
right? Um, in some people, it may not be completely healthy,
Yeah.
right? Because you have people that go down the path of all or nothing. In the endurance space, you also have those that go and they say, okay, I run all the miles so I can eat all the food. That means that they're making, actually up front, I'm going to say it, call a spade a spade. They're making shitty food choices because they feel like they're getting away with it because they're being in a calorie deficit.
And if we jump on that point, because I think this is important across the board, if we
Mm.
look at that, that is an indication that their mindset didn't change.
Yes.
So
Yep.
they're not looking at the food, which food is amazing. It is
Yep.
absolutely amazing. Not going to take it away from anyone in terms of the pleasure that they might experience when they're eating certain things. But if the mindset understands or the brain understands that food there that I'm going to eat will give me these nutrients, which means that I can feel better longer,
Yep.
you start to change your brain. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We change our brain, we can change our taste buds,
Yep.
which I'll get into in a sec. But there was this study, like along this same research group, they've done when you're researching exercise and sort of the physiology, we're taking lots of blood measures, right? So we're
Yep.
looking at things like fasting glucose, fasting insulin, the whole range of blood work. We're looking at inflammatory markers, liver markers, because not only are these a sign of health, guys, these are a sign of what's going on in terms of
In the
energy
body.
creation.
Yep.
And so the fascinating thing is when you're doing like performance research, is that you're actually doing health research. So we're getting these elite and sub-elite athletes and we're getting examples of their blood work. Now, they're looking at in certain cohorts, at least 30% of these outwardly appearing healthy people that their body can do amazing things that are classed as pre-diabetic.
Pre-diabetic. Yep.
Now, I'm going to again, call a spade here. Pre-diabetic is diabetic, guys.
Hmm.
It just means that it's not diabetic enough for the doctor to want to give you medicine,
Yeah.
but it's diabetic.
But it is a window of time for you to modify things.
Correct. And so if someone says it's pre-diabetic, and if you happen to have had this kind of conversation with a health practitioner, don't say, "Oh, I'm almost there."
No, you're there.
No, it's saying, "Oh, I'm just here." Like I'm here, but I'm at the point where I can easily turn this around. But don't sort of say that, "Oh, I'm not quite there." No, you're already there, but you're not so far gone that you can't just turn this around.
There are new wording around pre-diabetic now too. You know,
Oh, great. I'd love to know.
the mitochondrial dysfunction, or
Yes.
you have metabolic syndrome.
Yes.
So these are words that you may hear when you're sitting there with your GP and they start
Yeah.
to talk about, metabolic syndrome. You can know that they're indicating that you are pre-diabetes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this became like a bit of a passion of mine, and it is a bit of a passion of mine because, like, yes, I'm a runner. A lot of the time, performance is defined by time, but performance is okay. Can you live the life you want to live the way you want to live it? Can your body do it? And can you play with your kids? If you're living in a two-story house, can you access all parts of your house and yard with like pretty freely? I'm not to say that you never need help, but are you able or are you avoiding going upstairs, guys?
And you get
Like
up
if you
off the
need to go
floor.
up,
Yep.
yeah, like, are you avoiding getting down on the floor because it's going to be too hard to get up? Are you avoiding going to the upstairs bathroom because you don't want to go up the stairs? Or are you minimizing the amount of time you need to go up the stairs? Like these little tiny decisions that we make in our brains are signs that our metabolic health potentially is struggling. Um, because be kind to our brains here, guys. Our brain is protecting us, right? It knows we're able to produce a certain amount of energy, and so it wants to protect ourselves, right? So it will try and talk you out of doing stuff like that because it sees what's going on in your cells. But it's a sign. If we can be a little bit aware of some of those thought processes, it's a sign. Like, are you always saying no to the stairs?
Become
I'm not
aware. So there's the key
like,
word, isn't it? Awareness.
yeah,
Yeah.
become aware, and because that is performance. And so when we're saying that these athletes that we would say have a high level of performance are showing signs of pre-diabetes or metabolic dysfunction, okay, what is this actually meaning? It's meaning, right, that their fasting insulin and their fasting glucose is elevated. Okay, that's purely what it is. And so, okay, now what does that mean? Essentially, what it's meaning is that their bodies are not processing all the carbs that they're eating very readily because in an ideal world, like, yes, you take on a bunch of carbs to fuel exercise, fine. Yes, you would have a spike in glucose and insulin. That's how our body processes it. It's all good, right? It's completely normal. It then comes back down at rest. Now, when we're on a high carb diet, unfortunately, it doesn't, we're not giving our bodies time to actually get those levels down. So there's a few ways we can do it, right? Because the other thing with a high carb diet is it feeds an addiction in our brain. It is
Yes.
carbs, sugars. So all carbs are sugar, guys, essentially broken down in the bloodstream, and it acts like a drug in the brain. Now, so what that means is that we won't feel full for very long because our brain wants another hit. Even though we don't need the energy, our brain wants another hit.
Yeah.
The other aspect behind it is that most carbs that we choose to eat, like most that we would go to, so things like our breads and our rices and our sugars, have a very low nutrient count, like in terms of vitamins and minerals. And so if we're giving our body a lot of calories without a lot of micronutrients, our bodies will want more micronutrients and tell us to eat more.
Yeah, because it's not getting what it wants.
It's
Yeah.
not getting what it wants. And so we end up, right, with this state where we're hungry again. So we get this constantly elevated level of glucose and insulin. And mostly, not that we're always measuring insulin, but it's particularly the problem is these elevated levels of insulin. We see it as the elevated levels of glucose, but it means it's alongside insulin. Um, and so because it's chronically elevated, we can't normalize. So our body then doesn't have these normal peaks and troughs anymore. We have these chronic elevations. And it's just not the way it's meant to be. And so because we're just not getting then that appropriate function of bringing the fuel into the cell, making the ATP, it's just not happening. We end up with these excess glucose, which goes to the liver. Great in a short-term scenario. But again, chronic elevation means chronic sending to the liver. What do we end up with then?
Fatty liver disease.
Fatty liver disease.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the same kind of thing. And so you have these athletes that are never letting their blood insulin levels drop because they're having so much carbs all the time because they're told to carb load, to
Yeah.
carb fuel all the way. Whew. And they end up with pre-diabetes. Now, what does this, coming back to this question, what does that actually mean? It means that their body has become intolerant to carbs,
Yeah.
right? In an ideal world, we've got these ups and downs. We're constantly adjusting our levels of hormones in the body, and the body just adjusts and deals. Now, when we're a little bit more intolerant to carbs, if we have a big bolus of carbs, a big meal of carbs, sorry for being a bit scientific, it's what the first word that comes to my head.
Yeah.
Um, yes, it goes up, but instead of coming straight back down, it stays elevated even though we're not eating more. It
Yeah.
stays elevated for longer. That essentially means we're intolerant. So if we had an allergy to nuts, would our doctors tell us to keep eating them and just take our EpiPen?
No. Well, some of them might, but they'd be, you know, getting in a bit of trouble. But no.
No, it's not the standard, it's not standard procedure. However, when we are diagnosed with something like pre-diabetes or diabetes
Yeah.
of any kind, what are we actually told to do?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Take, eat
Eat
whatever
a
you want, but
balanced diet.
eat a balanced diet, eat whatever you want, and take the medication. And it's great that we've got medication like insulin and metformin and all these things, right? They are tools that can be used
To assist
well
in the
when
process.
needed, right?
Yeah.
But if we are essentially intolerant to something, what is the best way to deal with an intolerance?
Avoidance.
Avoid it. Like how many of you listening here, your tummy feels funny if you're having dairy, so you don't have it? Like I'm sure there's going to be people listening along, putting up their
Yep.
hands, right? We need to change and reframe that to say, okay, if I'm not feeling great, maybe I need to rethink my carbs.
Yes. And there's a lot of people that talk about that too. Um, and the ways that you can notice in your body that you don't feel that great with excess carbs is paying attention to your joint pain as well. So, yep,
Yes.
gut inflammation is definitely going to be one of the ways, but there's a lot of information out there now and some research around the impact on joints from carbohydrates. And I align with Lesley in terms of if your joints are talking to you, maybe have a look at your intake of carbohydrates versus fats, and maybe you need to flip it around. Because often when someone then starts to bring more fat in their diet, they're lubricating their joints are happier, and you don't have the inflammation issues of the carbs. So,
Yes.
yeah,
But on top of that, I think, and what we probably don't talk about enough, like obvious, I agree, carbs can be a huge inflammation cause, predominantly because, we're not talking here about sweet potato, you
no,
know?
no, we're talking about breads and pastas and
Yeah,
processed. We're talking about heavily processed stuff as well.
yeah,
Yeah,
right. Um, and but the other aspect around this is like, okay, when you start to take some of those foods out, okay, what are we replacing them with?
yeah,
We're typically, as a start, even if we're not lowering our total carb count, like if you're just swapping out, say, bread for sweet potato, right? You're not necessarily lowering your carb count.
but you're
But what
changing the
vitamin
nutrients. Yeah,
you're changing that nutrient profile of what you're eating. And I think we don't talk enough about that aspect of going low carb. Once you start to prioritize fats and proteins, like what other nutrients are you getting alongside that you weren't getting before?
yeah,
And I think that's huge because, yeah, like I said, I think that's huge because ultimately, when we're filling up on things that are emptier in terms of the nutrient value, like inflammation is going to stay there. Like, because we often call like inflammation gets a bad rap, right?
it does have
Because
a role.
it had like it, yeah. And this is my thing is we don't want chronic inflammation, but um, transient inflammation, like reactive inflammation to events, is quite important. If we've sprained an ankle and we get swelling, that's inflammation. But the purpose of that is to bring healing to that part of the body. So inflammation, we shouldn't be yelling at it per se. We're going, okay, but if we're listening to our bodies and we're getting chronic inflammation that's hanging around, we really need to start to ask questions about what that's telling us. Like if I'm sore after running a marathon. Am I upset about that? No, because I know exactly why that's happened. I can understand it. Now, if that hangs around longer than expected, that's telling me a bunch of things potentially around not my exercise, guys. This is
Yeah,
telling me things around my quality of sleep, my stress in my life, like what's going on with my cortisol and other hormones. Um, I'm not typically at this point linking it back to my diet because that's something I've controlled
yeah.
quite tightly.
You're looking
So
at your other recovery mechanisms.
I'm looking at other things that are going on in my life. Like, am I having mental overload alongside the physical? All of these elements that then come into play. So there's a level of inflammation that I tolerate because I know that that's healthy inflammation in the sense of it needs to happen for my body to heal and recover. However, if it doesn't go to the right pattern, it's a huge red flag.
Yep. Yep. Now you and I can talk for days, I'm sure, because we have
I know.
so many similar things that we agree on and so many things that we don't agree on, but we both have that intellectual capacity.
Yes.
So we won't do that to everyone that's watching.
No.
But there's a couple of things that I just wanted to ask you because we'll sort of finish off with this, but people will be able to find you because I'll pop your links on the video description and all that jazz.
Sure.
What would you, so we talked a lot about how you got into it, sort of why you did, um, what it is that fascinates you. We touched just then on recovery. What would be your, say, top 4 to 5 tips for someone in terms of exercise recovery? Because we know what it feels like, right? We've been a couch potato for ages. We're going to go out there and start doing something. We go out there and do it, and the next day we can't walk.
Yep. So this is where it comes back to my movement is medicine philosophy. Now there's two levels of that for me. There's the macro, which is the exercise side, then there's the micro, which is movement in and out of the cells. Now the macro is facilitating the blood flow, etc. The micro is really making sure we've got those nutrients. Now, this is essential for recovery. Now, what can we do to facilitate that? So, first, we want to have that macro movement happening. So, this does mean like doing some further gentle movement. Or how else do we get blood flow? Predominantly, it's heat therapy, right? So, whether it be sauna, I love hopping in a hot bath with Epsom salts and I pop essential oils in there too. And the benefit there is like we've got the temperature, which is getting the blood flow, but we've also then got the magnesium, right? In like I use magnesium chloride flakes in particular because I feel like that's a the type of magnesium that I like to use. There's so many types. And then I will that we need that magnesium to facilitate movement of substances in and out of the cells. Then I add essential oils that will facilitate um, reduced inflammation. So things like wintergreen and lavender and things like that. And sometimes I just pick something that feels good for me up the day. Ultimately, those oils that I add to that is going to, alongside that magnesium, facilitate movement of things in and out of the cells. The heat is then going to take that to the parts of the body where that's needed because it'll move it around in the blood. So to me, that's sort of a non-negotiable. If I could have an infrared sauna in my home, I would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just I'm that big a proponent of heat therapy. Um, and then gentle movement afterwards. So, for example, I did 7 hours on the trails yesterday. Today, I went for a half an hour walk in the morning just to get the blood flowing. It's not about exercise. It's about I want that blood flow happening. Alongside that, repair happens when we rest. Repair happens when we sleep. So I know, right, that last night my sleep was not going to be great because ultimately there's so much stuff buzzing in my body physically that it's actually not hard to get to sleep the night of a big workout, but it's hard to stay asleep.
Yeah.
I don't let that stress me because I know that that's a normal reaction of my body. I know that tonight and tomorrow night is when I really need to now focus on the sleep because my body's had 24 hours to deal with that.
Yeah.
Um, and then facilitating that. So it's that daily sleep. It's not about one chunk of sleep. It's like how much can we get into that habit of just maximizing that sleep? So,
Yeah.
yes, it's the hours, but it's staying asleep. So, if you're waking up through the night, like working on why is that? Because it's getting that continuous sleep. That's
Yeah.
key.
Yeah.
Um, mental rest, allowing mental space to deal with what you did with physically as well. Like not expecting to always be on.
Yeah.
So I didn't go onto my computer or do any work last night. Like, yes, I know I'm going to do that today, but I also had a slow start to the day.
Yeah.
So my new theme at the moment is allowing space for our body to do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
Like, and then we can look at, I'm not going to touch on nutrition again, but that's going to be part of recovery, right?
Yeah.
Not eating all the crap after a big workout because that's not going to facilitate recovery. So being a bit disciplined with what we choose after.
Yeah.
So hence being prepared, having the right food on hand so that you're not reaching for the poorer choices.
And what I have found too with some people or a lot of people is when they have put their body and their brain under a lot of stress, um, they don't give themselves what they need in the window of time where it might be
Yep.
quite good. And then you're lost. And because you run down the track of cravings and you're grabbing whatever you can, that's your body communicating to you, letting you know that maybe you should have eaten the better
Yep.
quality earlier. Yeah.
So what I'll have is, because often I have to drive for an hour or whatever to go to where I
Yeah.
might be running. So I will pack like a little cooler bag. And in that cooler bag, like, yes, I've got water. of course. Um, but I will have potentially a snack or a meal,
Yeah.
right? So that I've got something. If I'm not doing that, like there's basically a plan to go to a cafe and refuel, within a certain period of time. So there's
Yeah.
a plan um, to refuel. And so I suppose the thing there is I'm not going to go into the types of foods because
Yeah.
that's going to vary per person,
Yeah.
but have a plan, right? Don't leave it to chance, like pr fail to plan, prepare to fail
Yeah.
kind of thing. So
Yeah.
like do that meal prep kind
Yeah.
of thing. It's
Yeah.
a bit of a buzzword, but
And gone are the days where you starve yourself, guys. So
no,
if anyone is watching this and you think way back to the start of when Lesley was talking and she's talking about doing the Michelle Bridges transformation stuff and having low calories, um, there's a season for things like that. It's not all the time. And when you finished your massive workouts and things like that, you don't starve yourself. So it's not, you've got to keep looking after your body. Yeah.
it's so important. So even though I've talked about like eliminating carbs, um, it's really important that we're not actually restricting calories here.
Yeah.
Um, like when I've been talking about these dietary interventions more recently for me, it's important to know that I'm keeping energy supply there just from different sources.
Yes.
I really want to highlight that. So, and even for me, earlier this year, and I'm not going to extend this chat too long because again, we could go down a whole other rabbit hole. But I did experiment with some longer fasts earlier in the year. Um, that didn't turn out so good for me, even
Yeah.
though I was maintaining my calories, because for me, based on what I was already doing, um, it was just adding a little bit too much stress, and it
Stress.
actually was not good. And hey, I'm not saying this is something not to do. I'm saying it more like try things out, guys, around your nutrition, but don't like deprive yourself. You don't need to be depriving yourself. Sometimes changing like when we eat can be super useful. Changing what we eat can be super useful, but none of this is based on depriving ourselves of nutrients.
Yep. Yep. So I think what we might do is we'll finish it off.
Yeah.
So for anyone who wants to learn more from you or more about you, where would you like them to go to?
So I don't have a fancy website or any of that sort of bizzo.
That's
So
fine.
the best place to find me is essentially active on Instagram is probably where I'm most active. So it's at essentially.active. And you'll see my name there, Lesley Mason. You'll see lots of running content interspersed with a little bit of science, a little bit of food, a little bit of anything that comes to mind. I
Yep.
also have a Facebook page of the same name, if that's where people are at.
Yep. Cool.
And all my contact details are on both of those public pages.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So, thank you very much for doing this with me. And yeah, for anyone that's really super keen, wants to stalk Lesley that little bit more, I will also pop the links in on the video description. So, I'm just going to stop the recording now. So, thanks, gorgeous. I really appreciate that.
Thank you guys for your time.